Right before the summer break, Lewis Hamilton shocked the paddock with a secret move inside Ferrari. He quietly submitted hidden documents straight to the team's top management, filled with his personal blueprint on what the Scuderia must change if they want to reclaim their place at the very top of Formula One. What did Hamilton really expose in those papers? And why could this be the turning point in Ferrari's entire future? Stay with me until the very end, because the revelations are more explosive than anyone expected. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. So let's dive straight into what is quickly becoming one of the most turbulent and captivating storylines Formula One has witnessed in many years, perhaps even in decades. Just as the championship was placed on pause for its traditional summer intermission, Lewis Hamilton, the seven-time world champion and one of the most decorated drivers in the history of the sport, dropped a move so bold, so calculated, that it has left both insiders and fans in shock. He didn't simply step away to rest, nor did he allow himself to fade into the quiet rhythm of holidays. Instead, Hamilton set into motion a sequence of actions that are now reverberating all the way from the paddock to the boardrooms in Maranello, because what he chose to do was to deliver a collection of confidential dossiers, carefully prepared, brutally honest, and deeply analytical, straight into the hands of Ferrari's most senior executives. These weren't friendly notes or casual reflections. They were meticulously structured files filled with assessments, criticisms, proposals, and pointed recommendations that draw from his years immersed in the very heart of dominance at Mercedes. What makes these documents so electrifying is that they extend far beyond the surface of car performance. Hamilton did not confine himself to giving feedback about the SF-75's aerodynamics, the chassis balance, or the power unit's limitations. No, he plunged into the very veins of Ferrari, probing into the culture that has for too long shaped how this legendary team operates. He examined how information flows between engineers and strategists, how decisions are made under pressure, how mistakes are managed, or too often swept aside, and how fragile communication chains during a race weekend repeatedly cost the Scuderia dearly. It was as if Hamilton had taken a scalpel to Ferrari's DNA, dissecting its strengths and exposing its weaknesses with the cold precision of someone who has lived inside a winning machine for nearly a decade and knows exactly what it takes to create an unstoppable force. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. The files, according to whispers in the paddock, are neither pompous nor arrogant in tone. Hamilton was careful to clarify that he wasn't issuing decrees as though he were a dictator walking in to rewrite Ferrari's identity. Instead, he positioned his critiques as observations, as reflections gathered through years of hard-won experience. Yet there is no mistaking the sharpness that lies beneath his words. He reminded Ferrari of the bitter truth that drivers of extraordinary caliber, Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel, names that will forever echo through the halls of Formula One history, had poured their souls into Maranello, given years of their prime, and still departed without championships. He made it clear, with a determination that reverberates like thunder, that he will not allow himself to become another chapter in that same tragic pattern. His legacy will not mirror theirs in futility. That insistence, that almost defiant declaration, has sent tremors through the paddock, because it reveals the mindset of a man who refuses to waste his final years in the sport. Hamilton is not at Ferrari to simply collect a paycheck, pose for photographs, or bask in the aura of the red overalls. He has come to shape, to disrupt, to transform. He has come to bend Ferrari away from its paralyzing traditions, away from its nostalgic rituals that too often serve as anchors rather than wings. His aim is to sculpt Ferrari into a modern beast, one that moves with agility, makes decisions at lightning speed, and adapts as ruthlessly as Red Bull or Mercedes at their peak. And this time, it is not mere speculation or rumor. It is written, documented, delivered, and impossible to ignore. Within Ferrari's headquarters, insiders say the mood is anything but calm. There are those among the old guard, engineers, strategists, veterans steeped in decades of Maranello tradition, who feel wounded, who interpret Hamilton's assessments as insults, as attacks against the sacred Ferrari identity. But among the younger generation, among those frustrated by the repeated missteps, the botched pit stops, the baffling strategies, and the lack of unity that has haunted recent seasons, Hamilton's documents have struck a chord. For them, this intervention is the spark they have been waiting for, a call to arms that might finally push Ferrari to abandon the weight of outdated structures. The atmosphere is one of tension and anticipation, with factions forming inside the team itself, some clinging to pride and others desperate for reform. Hamilton's decision to submit these reports right before the summer shutdown was no accident. It was tactical brilliance. By doing so, He has guaranteed that Ferrari's leadership will spend the break not in peace but in turmoil, their minds spinning around his words. Every senior figure will now sit through endless days and nights reflecting, debating, and arguing about the changes he has demanded. The silence of August will be punctured not by the roar of engines but by restless conversations, by late-night calls, by simmering disagreements in boardrooms that stretch until dawn. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. The break, rather than offering relief, has become a period of introspection laced with pressure. And beyond Maranello, the wider world of Formula One is intoxicated by the drama. Fans are captivated, journalists are scrambling for leaks, and rival teams are watching closely, sensing that Hamilton may be forcing Ferrari into a metamorphosis unlike any in its recent past. Each gesture Hamilton makes in the paddock, each word he utters on the radio, each glance at the pit wall will now be scrutinized with obsessive attention, because everyone knows these reports have changed the dynamics forever. Formula One is as much about politics and power struggles as it is about speed, and this moment has combined all of those elements into a storm that feels impossible to ignore. What Hamilton has done, ultimately, is draw a definitive line between the Ferrari of yesterday and the Ferrari he envisions for tomorrow. His message is unmistakable. He refuses to be a passenger on a sinking ship. He has demanded that Ferrari shed the chains of tradition, embrace innovation with the urgency of survival, and learn to operate with a kind of discipline, unity, and adaptability that create dynasties. Whether Ferrari answers that call, whether they evolve under his influence or collapse under their own stubbornness, is the question now gripping the sport. This is not merely about the second half of the season. It is about the legacy of a driver unwilling to settle for mediocrity and a team standing at the edge of transformation, teetering between resurrection and ruin. Comes across not as that of a typical driver giving feedback, but as someone dissecting an entire system, challenging its foundations, and demanding a radical transformation. These memos, according to those who have seen them, were not ordinary notes scribbled down after a debrief. They resembled a detailed manifesto in which Hamilton, drawing on years of experience at Mercedes during one of the most dominant eras the sport has ever seen, set out why Ferrari continues to stumble at crucial moments. Every section of the report was infused with urgency and criticism, covering both the tangible weaknesses of the car itself and the intangible but equally destructive flaws in the team structure. Hamilton apparently opened with the technical side. He spoke of the braking systems with sharp precision, explaining that they lack consistency and that the feel is nowhere near what a driver of his caliber requires. The transition from heavy braking into medium-speed corners, a phase where Hamilton has historically excelled, does not give him the sensation of control he craves. He explained that the feedback through the pedal feels unreliable, oscillating between too aggressive and too vague, preventing him from building confidence lap after lap. He mentioned steering configurations that leave him disconnected from the asphalt, describing the wheel as sometimes excessively rigid and at other times frustratingly dull, robbing him of the exactness he used to rely on. He pointed out how the engine braking maps often go against his instincts, interrupting the flow of his natural corner entry rhythm and forcing him to adjust to an artificial style of driving that feels alien to him. And then he dissected the weight distribution, stressing that small imperfections in balance create exponential consequences when the car is pushed to its absolute limits, especially under mixed weather conditions. The Spa weekend was highlighted as a case study. According to the leaks, Hamilton pushed Ferrari's engineers to allow him to test an aggressive brake setup he had specifically requested. In the rain, the adjustment seemed inspired. For brief moments, he looked transcendent, slicing through corners with control and daring, almost reminiscent of his peak years at Mercedes. But that brilliance was fleeting. When the track began to dry in qualifying, the same system betrayed him. The balance shifted unpredictably, and Hamilton lost control in a high-speed section, spinning in a way that shocked even him. Engineers stared at the data trying to rationalize the anomaly, but Hamilton saw it differently. For him, the incident wasn't just a spin, it was a symptom. It revealed how precarious Ferrari's platform is, how fragile the margin of confidence remains, and how much he is being forced to compensate for shortcomings that should already have been ironed out by the team. He sees experimentation as part of progress, but those experiments must be grounded, methodical, and secure, not like throwing dice in a casino. From there, Hamilton turned his focus to what truly frustrates him, the internal machine of Ferrari itself. The car's flaws, while irritating, are solvable with time. What he finds intolerable is the slowness with which the Scuderia makes decisions. He criticized the pit wall for hesitation during races, describing how strategy calls are delayed because discussions drag on too long. He painted a picture of engineers stuck in debates, voices overlapping, processes bogged down, all while their rivals act decisively in real time. He compared this inefficiency to his years at Mercedes, where the organizational culture revolved around speed, clarity, and ruthless efficiency. At Mercedes, individuals were trusted and empowered to make crucial calls without having to climb through endless ladders of approval. At Ferrari, however, Hamilton sees a system that suffocates itself with layers of hierarchy, drowning in politics and chains of command. His words reportedly cut deep. By the time Ferrari decides, the race has already decided itself. What makes these memos so explosive is that Hamilton did not stop at critiquing the race team. He went further, questioning Ferrari as an entire institution. He knows that Ferrari is not merely another constructor, it is a global icon, wrapped in national pride, historical prestige, and the scrutiny of shareholders who sit in boardrooms far from the paddock. Every decision is weighed not just by engineers in Maranello but by executives in Turin and Milan, men in suits whose influence bleeds into Formula One operations. Hamilton is essentially demanding that this shadowy influence be reduced, that the sporting team be liberated from corporate micromanagement. He is calling for new, faster channels of communication, stripped of bureaucracy, where information flows directly and instantly. He insists that Fred Vasseur must be given true independence, that the team principal should not have to fight unseen battles with managers outside the garage before making a racing call. He wants Ferrari to adopt a culture closer to Mercedes' golden years, where streamlined authority, trust, and unified action forged an empire of dominance. But therein lies the storm. Ferrari has never been an organization eager to bend to outside visions, no matter how decorated the source. For decades, Ferrari has clung to tradition, resisting radical restructuring even when the evidence of inefficiency was overwhelming. Hamilton's proposals, bold and uncompromising, are nothing short of a demand to tear down elements of Ferrari's identity. To grant Vasseur autonomy would be to wrest power from the executives and the boardrooms who view themselves as custodians of Ferrari's brand. To cut through hierarchy would mean redefining how the Scuderia operates at its very core. And so the question lingers, heavy and unresolved. Will Ferrari dare to accept Hamilton's challenge, risking an identity shift in the hope of finally clawing its way back to the top? Or will the weight of history, politics, and pride crush the vision of the man they brought in to end the drought? What amplifies the drama is the reaction swirling around the paddock. Rival teams, always attentive to the tremors at Ferrari, are watching with keen interest. Some interpret Hamilton's battle as another example of Ferrari devouring itself, history repeating with a new victim. Others whisper with concern, recognizing that if Ferrari does concede and embrace Hamilton's blueprint, it could awaken a giant capable of returning to its Schumacher-era ferocity. The memos, therefore, are not just internal critiques. They are a line drawn in the sand, a test of wills between a seven-time world champion who refuses to waste his final years in mediocrity and a team that has always valued its traditions as much as its trophies. And now, the sport waits. Hamilton has fired the shot. Ferrari must decide whether to dismantle barriers and evolve into something new or to remain bound by the same structures that have held them back for over a decade. The answer to that question could determine whether the Hamilton-Ferrari chapter becomes a glorious resurrection or one of the most dramatic implosions Formula One has ever witnessed. The motorsport universe is in constant motion, reshaping itself with every announcement, every rumor, and every decision that filters out of the paddock. Among the stories currently dominating conversations is the unexpected swirl of speculation surrounding Mick Schumacher, a driver whose surname alone guarantees attention, but whose personal career has been a roller coaster of opportunities, setbacks, and uncertainty. Suddenly, whispers suggest that Cadillac, an automotive giant steadily expanding its footprint in the endurance racing world and quietly signaling interest in the elite arena of Formula One, has Mick in its sights for a role that could redefine his trajectory. The murmurs place him in contention for a place with the Cadillac-affiliated Hota Endurance Squad, a move that would not only provide him with a stable professional platform but also potentially position him as a reserve candidate for Cadillac should their ambitions to enter Formula One crystallize. The momentum behind this idea grew exponentially after Jenson Button, the ever-respected 2009 world champion, publicly announced that he would be walking away from competitive racing at the close of the current season. Button's decision, while not entirely shocking given his gradual shift toward broadcasting, commentary, and ambassadorial roles, still represents a seismic change. His retirement leaves behind a vacuum that ripples far beyond endurance paddocks. For years, Button's presence has symbolized continuity, adaptability, and charisma, and the moment he steps aside, the scramble begins to see who might step forward to seize the openings his absence creates. For Mick, long criticized as a driver stranded between potential and performance, this timing feels almost uncanny. The sudden availability of a slot at Cadillac Hota intertwines perfectly with his need for a springboard to re-establish himself as a relevant figure in the motorsport hierarchy. For Cadillac, the appeal is obvious. Attaching their brand to a Schumacher injects instant recognition, stirs fan interest, and lends legitimacy to whatever projects they choose to pursue next. Fans and insiders alike are divided. Some see this as the golden ticket Mick has been waiting for, a genuine chance to climb out of the shadows of failed F1 campaigns and prove himself anew in a challenging environment that rewards consistency and adaptability. Others remain skeptical, arguing that Cadillac might be better off grooming younger, less scrutinized talent rather than investing in a figure weighed down by the expectations of a famous last name. Yet the reality is that Mick's presence guarantees conversation, and in modern motorsport, visibility is often as valuable as raw performance. His possible recruitment reflects the complex intersection of sporting ambition, commercial strategy, and brand politics that now dominate decisions at every level of racing. At the same time, the broader motorsport stage is being reshaped by an entirely different but equally heated debate, the relentless tug-of-war over the global Formula One calendar. The schedule, already bursting at the seams with record-breaking numbers of races, is now at risk of collapsing under its own weight as more and more nations throw their hats into the ring, determined to host the world's most glamorous motorsport spectacle. Portugal has emerged as a strong player once again, with its Prime Minister himself openly lobbying for the return of Portimao by 2027. That venue, beloved for its sweeping elevation changes and dramatic wheel-to-wheel battles, represents the kind of circuit that hardcore fans yearn for. Istanbul Park, another jewel from the past, continues its push to make a comeback, reminding the sport of unforgettable moments it once delivered. But beyond the familiar names, new challengers are rewriting the map of possibilities. South Africa's campaign continues to gather momentum, with promoters and politicians adamant that Formula One must return to the African continent, a market untouched for decades but overflowing with passion and symbolic significance. Rwanda, an unexpected contender, has astonished many with its determination to build a case around economic growth and tourism, leveraging motorsport as a gateway to global visibility. Then there is Thailand, which has exploded into contention with remarkable force. With Bangkok spearheaded by immense governmental financial backing, the Thai bid suddenly looks like one of the strongest, and it's hard to ignore the allure of bringing the circus to Southeast Asia's bustling heart. Yet every new promise collides with the immovable obstacle of reality. The calendar cannot expand indefinitely. Teams are exhausted by endless logistics, mechanics are pushed to their limits, and even fans are beginning to voice fatigue at the marathon-like seasons. To add one circuit means to remove another, and that trade-off turns into a battlefield of its own. Historic venues risk being sacrificed, not because they fail to deliver thrilling races, but because their governments lack the financial clout to compete with wealthier, hungrier nations. This creates a sharp divide between tradition and expansion, sparking endless debates about whether Formula One should be driven by passion or by the size of a check. Madrid embodies the controversy perfectly. Despite skepticism surrounding its proposed layout and its ability to deliver genuine racing excitement, the Spanish capital appears virtually guaranteed a slot on the future schedule. The reasoning has little to do with the purity of sport and everything to do with politics, influence, and economic incentives. While many fans question the logic of securing Madrid's place at the expense of legendary venues, those in power see the financial stability such deals bring as essential. This tension highlights the broader crisis at the heart of Formula One. Is it a sport chasing authenticity, or a traveling circus selling its spectacle to the highest bidder? As these two storms, driver uncertainty and calendar politics, unfold simultaneously, the parallels are striking. Mick Schumacher's career hangs in the balance, waiting for the right alignment of opportunity and ambition, just as nations compete furiously for the chance to host a race that could redefine their image on the global stage. Both stories reflect the same underlying truth. In modern motorsport, nothing is guaranteed, and survival depends not just on skill or heritage but on timing, influence, and the ability to seize fleeting chances. Every decision sends ripples across multiple series, every move reshapes the hierarchy, and every whisper in the paddock could evolve into a headline that alters the sport's future. The world of Formula One thrives on unpredictability, and the recent developments inside the paddock have sent waves of intrigue, speculation, and whispered conversations through every hospitality suite and garage. A perfect example lies in the sudden gamble undertaken by Haas, a team long perceived as cautious, pragmatic, and forever chained to its limited resources. Out of nowhere, the American outfit has decided to unveil an ambitious mid-season upgrade package that no one in the media or rival camps saw coming. On paper, it feels almost irrational for a squad with no realistic shot at a world title to dedicate scarce funding to a high-risk technical leap. Yet, when the pieces of context are aligned, the strategy reveals itself not as recklessness, but as a calculated wager designed to potentially reshape their immediate future. Unlike the majority of their adversaries, Haas benefits from an unusual operating model that hinges heavily on its technical relationship with Ferrari. The team purchases a significant amount of hardware and parts directly from Maranello, dramatically reducing the workload of its own design group. This structural difference liberates resources, manpower, and mental bandwidth that other midfield contenders simply cannot afford. Instead of spending every waking hour and every euro on reinventing components already perfected by Ferrari, Haas can redirect attention toward pinpointed improvements. That is precisely why the decision to push through this new upgrade, while shocking to outsiders, is not only plausible but logical. The stakes are monumental for a squad of their size. At this stage of the championship, Haas finds itself holding 35 points, an amount that, in the ultra-tight world of the midfield, places them within touching distance of multiple competitors. The razor-thin margin separating 7th from 9th in the constructors' table may appear trivial to a casual observer, but inside Formula One those positions dictate millions in prize money. That cash flow does not just pad the books, it directly decides whether contracts can be renewed, whether new engineers can be recruited, whether factory upgrades can be financed, and even whether long-serving mechanics keep their livelihoods. In a sport where survival is as brutal as the racing itself, one successful aerodynamic step could literally safeguard the future of dozens of employees while simultaneously proving to sponsors that Haas remains a team worth investing in. The dream is not without precedent. Just a season ago, Alpine looked stranded, languishing in anonymity, buried by inconsistency and internal confusion. Then came that extraordinary weekend in Sao Paulo, where, against all expectations, the French outfit delivered a double podium finish that instantly rebranded their campaign and injected fresh energy into the organization. Haas is now chasing its own miracle moment, hoping that their new car philosophy can conjure a result so striking that it redefines not only their season, but also their trajectory as a permanent player in Formula One's turbulent midfield. A leap from 9th to 7th might sound minor, yet within the walls of the Haas garage, it is the difference between stagnation and rebirth, between being seen as Ferrari's dependent junior and as a legitimate, self-sufficient challenger willing to take risks when it matters most. While Haas engineers burn midnight oil to perfect their innovation, another transformation simmers at the very front of the grid, where Red Bull finds itself wrestling with internal metamorphosis that could alter the DNA of its racing empire. With Christian Horner temporarily absent, Laurent Mekies has stepped into a role that goes far beyond caretaker. Known for his relentless drive, inquisitive mind, and infectious motivational style, Mekies has already drawn public acknowledgement from Max Verstappen himself, a driver not often inclined to praise management figures. For Verstappen to publicly commend Mekies' curiosity and vigor hints at a subtle yet significant cultural shift inside the reigning champions' camp. But beneath the surface lies the question that defines Red Bull's entire identity. Who will drive their cars next season, and how will the philosophy behind that decision evolve? For decades, Red Bull has been notorious for its merciless conveyor belt of talent. Young drivers were thrown into the spotlight with minimal patience. If they failed to deliver instant results, they were unceremoniously discarded. That culture produced both heroes and casualties. It built champions but destroyed as many careers as it saved. Under Horner's iron grip, continuity was nearly impossible to achieve. Now, however, with Mekies at the helm, there is chatter, still quiet, still uncertain, that perhaps Red Bull could embrace a more stable, less ruthless approach. Rumors swirl that both current drivers might be retained into the next campaign, something unimaginable in Horner's era of perpetual reshuffling. This potential pivot toward stability has ignited fierce debates within Red Bull's political structure. Helmut Marko, the influential kingmaker of young talent, remains firmly committed to Yuki Tsunoda, seeing in him flashes of raw speed and personality capable of flourishing with the right guidance. Simultaneously, Liam Lawson continues to strengthen his resume, proving in tests and reserve outings that he is ready to seize a seat at a moment's notice. And watching from the shadows are the prodigies, Arvid Lindblad and Isaac Hadjar, teenagers already anointed by insiders as future race winners, each hungry for their chance to climb the ladder. This crowded pipeline has created an atmosphere of delicate tension. Every practice session, every qualifying lap, Every radio message now carries weight beyond the stopwatch. Results in the remaining races of the year will not just shape championship standings. They will decide careers, dictate legacies, and set the tone for the next chapter of Red Bull's dominance. If Mickey's softer philosophy prevails, the team may prioritize cohesion and continuity, gambling that stability around Verstappen will prolong their supremacy. But should performance dip, or if Verstappen himself signals frustration at a lack of evolution, the pendulum could swing back toward Red Bull's ruthless traditions, cutting drivers loose in an instant and resetting the conveyor belt once again. What unfolds here is far more than the tale of one team seeking upgrades or another wrestling with driver contracts. It is a portrait of Formula One itself, where every choice, whether to risk an aerodynamic overhaul or to reconsider decades of cultural philosophy, ripples outward with consequences that can transform the sport's landscape. Haas's decision embodies the desperation and determination of smaller outfits fighting tooth and nail for survival, while Red Bull's struggle reflects the complex politics of champions torn between maintaining dominance and redefining their future identity. Both stories unfold simultaneously, weaving together to remind us why Formula One continues to be the ultimate drama. It is not merely a competition of cars on track, but a theater of ambition, risk, loyalty, betrayal, and reinvention. In a world where fortunes are decided by fractions of a second and boardroom whispers, Haas and Red Bull now find themselves on parallel paths of reinvention. One battling to remain relevant, the other questioning whether to evolve beyond its own ruthless legacy. And as always in this sport, nothing is guaranteed except the certainty that history is being rewritten before our very eyes. Mercedes is living through a moment of transition that feels almost like a gamble with destiny, because inside Brackley there is an awareness that the present struggles cannot be allowed to define the team's identity, nor diminish the aura of a squad that once dominated Formula One with unprecedented consistency. George Russell has openly downplayed the severity of their recent decline, explaining that the setbacks are not disastrous but rather a byproduct of a deliberate strategy where nearly every ounce of energy, engineering effort, and financial resource is being redirected toward the regulation revolution of 2026. Engineers, aerodynamicists, and strategists have been working in secrecy for months, sketching outlines of machines that could alter the competitive order once the new rulebook comes into play. The preliminary concept images emerging from internal development hint at radically redefined cars, tighter dimensions, slimmer lines, aggressive proportions, and crucially, the disappearance of wheel covers that were introduced in the current cycle. Russell himself has expressed genuine enthusiasm for these designs, emphasizing that they bring back a sense of purity to the sport, with cars that are not only designed to perform at the highest level but also recapture a kind of visceral aesthetic appeal that excites fans just by sight. Yet, the reality is that Formula One is not a sport that tolerates long-term promises without short-term reassurance. Every Grand Prix weekend, Mercedes is still measured, scrutinized, and judged by its lap times, its strategy calls, and its results. Sponsors, partners, and passionate supporters demand evidence that the team remains competitive in the present, even if the majority of intellectual focus is already leaning toward the future. Poor results may be tolerable from an internal perspective, but the perception externally is entirely different. A slip in performance raises doubts, and doubts lead to whispers, and whispers turn into questions about whether Mercedes still possesses the same relentless DNA that carried them through years of dominance. The balance is delicate. Focus too much on the future and risk alienating those who invest in the present, or cling too tightly to current races and risk falling behind in the next era. This balancing act defines the current Mercedes journey, an organization straining to prove it can walk both paths simultaneously. Ferrari, meanwhile, is living its own intricate drama, one that stretches far beyond lap times and strategy calls. Piero Ferrari, heir to the legacy of his father Enzo, has candidly admitted that the Scuderia has been caught in destructive cycles before. Cycles of ambition followed by collapse, flashes of brilliance followed by droughts of despair. In the modern era of cost controls, the road to recovery is narrower than ever. The past solutions, where Maranello would simply inject hundreds of millions into projects to brute force success, are now impossible under strict financial regulations. Ferrari can no longer rely on financial muscle alone. Instead, ingenuity, adaptability, and precision execution must replace the traditional approach of overspending rivals. And it is precisely here that Lewis Hamilton's presence has become such a disruptive force. His private communications to Ferrari's leadership have been described less as technical debriefs and more as passionate manifestos. They are not limited to asking for minor mechanical adjustments. They are challenging the very operating philosophy of Ferrari as an institution. He has been pushing for an internal revolution, streamlining decision-making processes, tearing down bureaucratic barriers, and injecting boldness into a structure that for too long has been weighed down by politics, tradition, and inertia. Hamilton is demanding a Ferrari that is leaner, faster-thinking, less constrained by its own myth, and more capable of adapting in real time to a sport that evolves at breathtaking speed. The paradox, however, is almost cruel. Transforming an organization like Ferrari is not a task measured in weeks or even months. It is a journey that stretches across years. By the time these structural overhauls bear full fruit, Hamilton himself may no longer be behind the wheel. The changes he is calling for, the reforms he is insisting on, may ultimately deliver results not in his hands, but in the hands of Charles Leclerc or whoever the Scuderia anoints as their future leader. The prospect is fascinating. Hamilton could be remembered not as the driver who immediately returned Ferrari to glory, but as the visionary who dismantled the old machinery of inefficiency and replaced it with a system capable of conquering the future. His fingerprints may remain all over Ferrari's renaissance, even if he himself steps away from racing without ever lifting a championship trophy in red. For Leclerc, this possibility is as tantalizing as it is complex. He may one day be the driver reaping the benefits of Hamilton's hard-edged reforms, inheriting a Ferrari restructured by the wisdom of one of the sport's most successful champions. For the Tifosi, the emotions are a whirlwind. They watch Hamilton demand urgency, shake the foundations of Maranello, and push for sweeping cultural changes that challenge the very traditions they revere. They also recognize the cruel passage of time, the ever-lengthening gap since Ferrari's last title, and the knowledge that every season without glory deepens the drought. Hamilton himself may wrestle with this duality. On one side lies the possibility of frustration, of never achieving the fairy tale ending of conquering in red. On the other lies a different kind of immortality, the chance to be remembered as the architect who rebuilt Ferrari from within, who reshaped it into a machine capable of dominance long after his own career was finished. This is not the legacy of a driver measured in podiums alone, but of a reformer whose vision and insistence outlived his own seasons on track. And so the sport finds itself at the intersection of present and future, of short-term results and long-term visions. Mercedes is attempting to hold the line while pouring its soul into 2026, and Ferrari is caught between respecting its traditions and allowing Hamilton to tear them down in pursuit of rebirth. The tension is magnetic, because no matter what unfolds, history will not only be written in race results, but also in the unseen battles of culture, philosophy, and identity that shape these titanic teams. Lewis Hamilton ha mostrado durante su recent pausa una imagen de serenidad, de alguien que aparentemente se encuentra en paz consigo mismo y que aprovecha los días ligos del incesante calendario de la Fórmula 1 para abrazar los placeres más sencillos de la vida. Se lo ha visto atravesando distintos rincones de los Estados Unidos, recorriendo carreteras interminables, disfrutando de atardeceres en silencio, compartiendo paseos con su inseparable compañero Roscoe, dedicando horas a la música y dejando que las melodías sean el refugio de su espíritu inquieto. Ante los ojos del público París que se trata de un hombre que busca equilibrio, que se aleja del ruido constante, que recarga energías después de temporadas agitadoras marcadas por la exigencia, los viajes interminables y la presión de competir en el nivel más alto. Sin embargo, detrás de esa calma aparente late un pulso diferente, mucho más intenso. Hamilton nunca desconecta del todo. Mientras sonríe ante las cámaras o acaricia a su perro en un parque tranquilo, su mente continúa girando, diseñando, planeando, analizando, calculando cada detalle del futuro inmediato y también de su legado. El piloto británico, incluso en sus momentos de descanso, permanece ligado de manera indestructible al rugido del motor, al olor a goma quemada, al peso de las expectativas que lo han acompañado desde que era un niño en los karts. Lo que parece una simple pausa es, en realidad, un tiempo de introspección y proyección. Reflexiona sobre lo ya vivido, pero también imagina lo que viene, sobre todo ahora que se encuentra en una etapa crucial, con más pasado que futuro en el deporte que lo consagro. Consciente de que vestir el rojo de Ferrari significa más que conducir un auto, Hamilton percibe esta aventura como la mayor apuesta de su trayectoria. Ferrari no es una escuderia cualquiera, es un símbolo universal, un mito que trasciende generations, una bandera que millones de aficionados encienden con devoción. Ponerse al volante de un monoplaza con el cavallino rampante implica aceptar no solo la exigencia deportiva, sino la carga cultural, la historia, las pasiones, Las contradictions y la política interna de una institución que vive tanto de su gloria como de sus cicatrices. En reuniones privadas y charlas discretas, Hamilton ha dejado claro que no legó a Maranello para ser uno más ni para conformarse con participar. Legó con exigencias, con expectativas, con una visión clara de lo que se necesita para transformar al equipo. Les ha trazado un plan de acción, una hoja de ruta que vie mucho más allá de la aerodinámica o de los caballos de potencia. Su mensaje es directo y sin adornos. Ferrari debe reinventarse o quedar atrapada en un bucle de frustrations. Les ha exigido a los ingenieros audacia en la innovación, libertad para romper con esquemas arcaicos y valencia para cambiar incluso lo que parecía intocable. A la directiva lo ha reclamado menos política interna y más unión, menos luchas de ego y más confianza en el talento colectivo. Hamilton, con su experiencia, sabe que un equipo no gana únicamente con un coche veloz, sino con la mentalidad de adaptarse, de aprender, de superar errores sin miedo a reconocerlos. El dilema que enfrenta Ferrari es profundo. Durante décadas ha oscilado entre la nostalgia por su pasado glorioso y la necesidad de adaptarse una Fórmula 1 que no espera por nadie. Hamilton no solo les ha entregado un mapa técnico, sino también un manifesto cultural. Les pide humildad. Les recuerda que escuchar a cada miembro del equipo puede ser tan valioso como un alerón nuevo. Les exige flexibilidad para reaccionar a circunstancias cambiantes, courage para tomar decisiones impopulares y desprendimiento de un orgullo que tantas veces ha sido un obstáculo. Hamilton sabe que el tiempo no está de su lado. Cada temporada que pasa es una oportunidad menos para conquistar lo que todavía no ha logrado. Un título con la Scuderia más famosa del planeta. El desenlace depende ahora de hasta donde esté dispuesto Ferrari a romper sus cadenas internas. Si aceptan la visión de Hamilton, si abrazan la transformación que les propone, podrían no solo volver a lo más alto, sino escribir uno de los capítulos más resonantes en la historia del deporte. Una victoria mundial con Hamilton vestido de rojo sería una hazaña que quedaría grabada para siempre. Un símbolo comparable con los días de Fangio, Lauda o Schumacher, una epopeya que convertiría al británico en una leyenda aún más intocable, y al mismo tiempo devolvería a Ferrari la corona que ha buscado sin descanso. Sería una redención global, una declaración de que el mito no pertenece únicamente al pasado, sino también al presente y al futuro. Pero si deciden resistirse, si prevalece la rigidez que tantas veces los ha condenado, el desenlace será inevitablemente amargo. Hamilton no desperdiciará sus últimos años en un laberinto de promesas incumplidas y errores repetidos. Si no percibe evolución, si no encuentra respuesta a su llamado, dará un paso al costado. Se irá con el peso de su inmenso legado intacto, pero también con la herida de un sueño inconcluso. Para Ferrari, en cambio, sería otra oportunidad perdida. Otra página manchada de frustración, otro recordatorio de que tuvieron en sus manos el piloto más grande de su era y no supieron escucharlo. En este momento, la Fórmula 1 contiene la respiración. Todo el mundo observa el desenlace de esta alianza cargada de simbolismo, de riesgo, de drama y de esperanza. La incógnita que domina el paddock no es técnica, es existencial. ¿Será Ferrari capaz de escuchar, de transformarse, de dejar atrás el peso de su arrogancia y confiar en el hombre que ha vencido a todos y que ansia una última batalla? ¿O volverán a encerrarse en su propia fortaleza de orgullo, condenando a ambos a una historia marcada no por la gloria compartida, sino por la decepción de lo que pudo haber sido y nunca fue?